I'm Brittany, and you're listening to Tribe Travelers, where we bring you the experiences of families of color living abroad. Today we have with us Dr. Ahmad and Loretta Brewer. Dr. Brewer is a psychologist, and he and his wife have been married for almost 25 years. They have 4 children, a son aged 18, a daughter aged 17, and twins, a boy and a girl, ages 5. Their oldest is in the States working, and the next oldest is going back tomorrow. They've lived in Mexico for 2.5 years and have no intention to go back to the U.S. They are a simple family looking to own land and teach their children how to love God and how to enjoy His creation. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Especially in light of the fact that your daughter is leaving tomorrow. I can't imagine.
Oh, my goodness.
So tell us more about your family. What made you guys want to move abroad? Why did you choose Mexico? Where exactly in Mexico are you?
All right. Well, just running through a very quick piece. One of the things that really moved us, I guess, to get out of the States, there is, and as many people know, there's a lot of stuff right now going on in the States. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't so much the political climate that caused us to leave. It was more so the undercurrent. There's just a lot of stuff that's just happening. And one of the biggest ones for us is teaching our kids how to be decent societal individuals. And there was just a lot of things that were being taught, a lot of things, like I said, undercurrent and things that were just happening in the States that would cause them to question various things. And we wanted them to live more simply. We realized that, one of the things, and I'll say this, and I'm not saying this is true for everyone, but I'm saying this is like what I believe to be a general scenario about the States. I think one of the things that we are taught in the States without really trying to teach it is a certain level of arrogance. That America is, and America is great, by the way. Let me start off by saying that. But there's America the Great, and then there's everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I didn't want my kids, my wife and myself, we didn't want our kids growing up believing that they were just better than everybody else on the earth. And so the thought was, again, you know what? Instead of them believing that, they're the one, number one and everybody else is down there, let's get them a more of a world view. And in order to do that, we've got to actually get them out into the world. And so that was one of the biggest things that we wanted to get them involved with. And so to help their morality, to help them as individuals, world individuals, and to get them more acclimated with that.
And for me, I just have 2 things. I wanted us to eat healthier. And I know a lot of the foods, we hear it sometimes that, the food is killing us. And so by being here, we're able to eat fresh foods. Not saying that it's not there, but when I see the man or the woman coming from behind the farm with the chicken, I know my chicken is as good as it's going to get. So the food was one. And the other thing was the culture. We love the family atmosphere. And it's so hard to reproduce that in America when everybody's doing their own thing, everybody's going their own separate ways. And here, people still gather around the table for lunch, sometimes dinner, even breakfast we've even seen. And so we wanted them to see the family atmosphere. It's as strong as it can be. And we love it here in Mexico.
So when you guys realized that you wanted to leave the States, how long did it take you to put your plan into action, and what steps did you take?
I think the day my husband told me he was thinking about leaving, I think he would have moved the same day. Like he told me, and like in the next few hours, we've been moved completely. For me, it took the first time we actually talked about moving to Mexico, which was a few years ago. It took us a whole year. I had so many reservations and so many hesitations and just everything. I was finding every reason to not go. And then a couple of times I was like, well, let's go visit first. So in 3 months, in that year time, the first 3 months, we actually went to Mexico a few times. And the first time I went, no, not having it. The second time I was like, okay, it might work. And then the third time we went, I was like, I'm ready to go now.
Oh, wow. Third time's the charm.
Yeah.
So actually from that third time, I think it may have been maybe 6 months after, within that year's time, 6 months after.
Wow. 3 trips in 6 months. Yeah. Wow. You are persistent. You was gonna get that approval.
And look, again, I think the biggest thing is, and I'm just, okay, so, I am a psychologist, but I also do a lot of public speaking, and I do marriage and family. So I have to say that, preface my statement by saying that I love talking about my wife, and I love helping other couples and things as well. So, and the reason why I said that was because one of the things that I share often enough about men is that for the most part, and in relationships, it only takes man 90 days for him to know exactly if this is the right person for him. Within the first 90 days, a man generally knows this is the one that I want. That's as long as it takes. And so when I met my wife, when I met her the first day, I said, listen, I want her as my wife. She said, you don't even know my last name. I said, I don't need to. It's going to change anyway. But I know what I want. And I think the same thing carried over even into the level of the move. It was hey, look, we can take as much time as you need, but understand, I don't need any time at all. If we just take the bag that we have right now, the clothes that we have on our backs right now, forget it all, take the trip down there, we'll buy all new stuff, whatever, but let's just get out of there immediately. And so that was my approach with it all.
So what was the turning point for you, Miss Loretta?
My kids, I wanted them to have freedom. Well, I don't like saying that because when you say freedom, people think, well, there's freedom in the States. Not necessarily saying that there isn't freedom, but it's a different type of freedom. Yes. And I wanted them to have the freedom to explore, the freedom to just be who they wanted to be, to make new friends, to learn a different language. I mean, all we knew was just English, and, to see them happy and just go outside more often, more frequently, seeing people who are not always on their phone, buried in their phones. When we went there, just in the few times we took the trip, I saw it and I was like, man, I like this. This is what I want. And that's what did it for me.
So with your older children who lived in the States all their life, and they were, I guess, teenagers, preteens when you guys left, how was the transition for them? I mean, for the little ones, they don't know. But for the older ones, how was it?
Oh, wow. I still think they're mad at us. It was very difficult for them. They were so our kids have always been homeschooled, but right before we went to Mexico the first time, we actually put them in school for the first time. And they were just making new friends. They started this whole thing with school and they just loved it. And they were like, okay, we're leaving. What? We haven't even been here a month and we're moving already. And they were really upset. They were highly upset. And we tried to do all that we could when we moved there. And what made it difficult for them is because it was very little English amongst their peers. So even if they did any going out, they felt left out because they didn't understand what was going on. But that ended up being a great thing because it taught them how to speak Spanish very quickly. And so now they're both bilingual. So it ended up being good in that aspect. But like we said earlier, our oldest daughter is going back tomorrow because she wants to work. And she said, she's so tired of Mexico and whatever other feelings she may have with it. And I think mainly it's because she misses her brother. And so he's like, no, I'll come visit, but I'm not living there anymore. So.
Okay. And so how has it been for your little ones?
Yeah, they don't know any difference. I mean, they don't know the States, so they have nothing to compare it to.
Yeah. I think, and that's what made it hard for them because they were born and raised in the States, and then to take them to a different culture, although we saw the benefit in it, for them, it's like, no, this is all I know. And I don't want to have to digress in my technology or digress in some of the things that I'm accustomed to in my living, in some of the foods that I eat. I like what I eat, or I like this. And so bringing them there, they felt like they were going backwards, even though we showed them how, the benefits of it. It wasn't for them.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. I think it's a gamble. You hope for the best, but you sort of have to expect that you're going to have to deal with some things. And, sometimes the dice rolls in your favor and sometimes it doesn't, I guess.
Now, I want to know, as parents of children who have gone back to the States, like, how do you feel about that? Do you have mixed emotions? Did you expect it?
I have extreme emotions. Some days I'm really good. Some days I just cry because I miss my son a whole lot. And now our daughter is leaving. And so it just, as a parent, I know in Mexico and the States, it's just, a border away, but it seems so far away, and my biggest hurt or thought is if something happens to them, I'm so far away. Even though I know I can get on the plane, it's not the same like going around the corner if they were living in an apartment or, on their own or something. So it hurts, and then when I call to talk to, especially him, he's like, okay, Mom, I'm doing something, like, hey, I'm missing you. He's like, yeah, I miss you too. And I'm like, okay. So maybe it's just, the mama in me. My husband's like, whatever, they grown, let them be who they are. So I think he feels a whole lot different than I do.
Yeah, I mean, he's becoming himself. I mean, you gotta let him be himself. I think for me, my only reservation in both of them being back in the States was the original reason why we left. Mm-hmm. My personal, and my wife and I, both of us actually, we both talked about it many, many nights. Our concern is that they will get back into the same the same mode that they were, that, we try to take them from. And what we have seen, and I will say this, what we have seen from him, and it's nothing bad, but it's just that, now his life consists of work and home type thing.
The rat race.
Yeah, it's the same rat race that we tried to eliminate initially. He's back in it again. And it's like, come on, dude. No, we tried to get you out of it. And that's the same fear I feel also for our daughter going back, that it's going to get back into the same thing, that you're going to get back into the work and this and that. And you take no time for people. And that's been our family motto, is that people are always more important than things. And so you always take time for people. There's never a person. There's never a thing that you ever put above another person. And I think that's the one thing that for me, for us, because we both said it many times, that we really fear for the kids being back there, is that they'll get back into that. Let's do this. Let's get this. Let's acquire this, and those things like that.
So for your younger ones, of course, it's going to be much easier since they're young and they don't know the States. But looking into the future, when they get older, do you guys expect them to go back to the States? Of course, you don't want them to. As far as opportunities for higher education, because I think for a lot of people, that's a big thing.
It is.
Well, I will say one of the things that we don't, it's unpopular, but we don't stress for the educational piece. We don't stress the traditional educational piece, that you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you got to do that. The concept of being worldly minded, or more of a world traveler, more so is we've pushed for our children, all four of them, even the little ones, is trying to find out exactly who they are. What is their thing, if I can use that term, and then pushing them to develop their thing. All we ask of them, of the four of them, and we're raising the little ones now, obviously, to get to that same mindset, but all we ask is that you are someone who produces for humanity. Whatever you do, be someone that makes change for humanity in a positive way, and live your passion. Though I am a psych, I thoroughly believe, and my wife and I, we've been trying to do this with the kids, is to teach them, live your passion. Money is always able to come, but learn to live your passion. What is it, the thing that makes you jump out of the bed early in the morning? What makes you excited in the morning? And if that calling means that you've got to get some additional education to make it happen, then by all means, go for it. But if you can acquire that calling any way else, then by all means do it. And so even with the little ones, like I said, we're not pushing necessarily, go get the BA and then the MA and then the PhD or the MD. If that's what your calling calls for, by all means, go for it. But that can be acquired anywhere. But more so, I want you to live as a person with purpose, and that your purpose is to make change on this planet. You're here for a reason, not necessarily to collect a paycheck, but to change the atmosphere of this planet. And so whatever you do, that's what it is. And so that's more so what we've been able to instill within them. And the difference between them and the bigger ones is what we discussed already, was that the little ones have not, the little ones have not already had a chance. And I'm going to say a word, and I don't mean it in the way it may come across, but they haven't had a chance to be infected with a different mindset. So we got fresh, clean slates to start trying to push that into. Whereas the old ones already, it's growing up in a certain society, they've already got a chance to see, and in certain educational sectors, it's get a good education so you can get a good paying job, so you can, advance in this area. And so it's kind of hard to combat what they've already been taught. Like I said, whereas the little ones, they don't have that teaching. And, that's the purpose of moving away, was that they won't develop that. They'll develop, again, live your passion, be a society change maker, and whatever it takes to get to that point, by all means, do it.
All right, I'm with that. Can we get an amen? I mean, that just rings true on so many levels. And actually, I have 3 children. They're 7, 4, and 2, and we're pretty much unschoolers. And I'm all about living your passion and finding your passion and learning who you are as a person from an early age. And so that's what we're encouraging our children. We focus on reading, writing, arithmetic, but other than that, what are they interested in? My son is obsessed with trains. So he's all about building and engineering and science and that kind of stuff. And that's what we focus on.
Yes.
And the world is changing so fast. The traditional school system, honestly, is not keeping up with the changes of this world.
Yep. Agreed.
So I would say more and more, the most successful people did not go through the traditional school system.
Yeah. And I think, I'm looking at, you all do, interviews with the families of color. I think the one thing that we've got to remember as people of color is that, especially Black families, African-American families and things, is that you mentioned about the systems changing. We have been traditionally throughout our history, specifically in the U.S. and the Western Hemisphere. But since our time here, we have been very creative. We've had to be creative in order to do what we're doing. And so my problem, if I can use that term again, with America, is that America is now turning us away from our level of creativity to become robots and machines to fit into the American system. That's not who we are. We are very creative. We can go anywhere. We learn any language. We fit any culture. We can make anything into our own. So why don't we just go back and take over the world now and go back into the world and start going back to creating things? And that's where I think our strength is as a people. If we start going out and realize our levels of creativity, I mean, we're stronger than we realize. And this, I think, is where we can really make a major difference.
Very inspirational.
So on that note, do you view Mexico as a good place for people to go and tap into that creative energy?
In a lot of the conversations, and I think anytime I get a chance to spread what I'm getting ready to say, I try to do it. There are a number of individuals who, and I guess the terminology is Blaxit. There are a number of individuals who say, I want to leave, but I don't know how. Or I want something different in my life. Or even like right now, during this whole thing that's going on in the States right now with a lot of the police stuff and all that, there are people who are saying, listen, I want to do this. My encouragement, and I know there's people all over the place. There's people in Egypt, I'm sure, and all over the place. My statement, because we're the ones that's being interviewed today, is Mexico is so easy. I mean, it's so easy, and
it could be the jump start.
Yeah, and I mean the encouragement that I've given to a lot of our American friends, especially because a lot of the Black people in America live in the South. A good majority live in the South. And the South is like a little colony. What I have suggested is, listen, if you want to leave, we can create a little colony right here in Mexico. There is so much land. There is so much opportunity. Everything is inexpensive. I mean, it's so inexpensive here. We really could create, colonies of individuals here. So instead of trying to do other things, we can come here. So, I encourage folks to get out. But if you need to find a place to start, Mexico's right here. And they're very welcoming. They want you to come. And it's not just because you got money. They really enjoy you here. I mean, and so again, my encouragement for anyone, if you're looking to make this first start, Mexico. Where in Mexico?
Who cares?
I mean, yeah, really, who cares? It's wide
and I'm
open.
glad you mentioned a start, because the expat journey, it's not just A to B.
Yes.
And as you guys have said, it came to Mexico, you went back, now you're back in Mexico, and a place to start. Wherever you move to when you leave America, it doesn't have to be your final destination.
Correct.
I just want to ask your opinion. You mentioned a colony. I think about these things, and I did read that there are some Black Americans in Ghana trying to kind of develop this concept. Do you really think it could happen in Mexico? There's a lot of Black Americans in Mexico as of now, but I don't know, the unity factor. Are we united enough?
Yes. As a matter of fact, in the States, Atlanta would be considered the Mecca for
Yes.
Black Americans. In Mexico, that would be an area on the Yucatan, whether it's Merida, Tulum.
I've heard a lot about those cities.
A lot of our people go over there. And so, I mean, if I had to say an area where there were more Black Americans in Mexico than any other place, it would be right there on the Yucatan. In that area, yes, Merida, there's a lot of Black people. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a guy recently and he said, man, we're getting ready to go out and play ball. I said, basketball for real? You got a little team? He said, yeah, man, we run at least full court games for hours at a time. I said, really? He said, yeah. And I asked, I said, how many guys do you have out there? Just Black, just African Americans. He said, man, there's enough for 3 full teams. That means, that, I mean, yeah, so they're running, so 10 guys on a court at a time. That's 30, at least 30 Black men out there. So, yes. And in the south portion and the southern portion of Mexico is where, you know, we all obviously came from an African area, but when the Black came as slaves, they stayed more in the southern portion. And the darker skinned, the African originated people are more so in the southern portion of Mexico. Mm-hmm. And so there are a lot of darker, they consider themselves Africans, Afro-Mexicans. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot more Afro-Mexicans in the southern portion. And so again, Mexico is wide open. I mean, it's a big country. And I want to stress that as well. People think, it's just, it's just whatever. No. Mexico is a huge country. It's got 130 million people. It's a huge country. There's a good place, and it's a lot of land. Stressing that again, a whole lot of land. We really could do it. So yes, Black people can definitely come down and have that colony, or shoot, we can take over an entire city.
Okay, and I want to ask you this because you guys, you mentioned that you don't really hang around expat communities much, but like, would you be interested in moving to Merida or Tulum and being around more Black people? Or is that not really a concern for you? Because community is important when you're moving abroad. And as you said, with your teenagers, they kind of were forming their community and then they were taken away from it. And there was a void. So going abroad, it's really important to get connected and foster that community for a smooth transition for everybody.
But and even with Blacks, what we said, I think, that kind of hurt us when we first got here because, we did all the research and figured out where some of the Blacks were. Not granted, when we first came, we weren't necessarily in a Black community. However, we were trying to do like Black functions, but then we have to take into consideration as well. COVID kind of really messed things up. But even aside from that, things are open here in Mexico. It's not like it is in everywhere else that you can't go anywhere and do anything. And the Blacks tend to still stay by themselves. Yeah. We're not in a group. We don't do a lot of group things, or it's just, to me, it feels sort of the same. Like I'm in the States, and I live in one neighborhood and you live in another, and we don't really, see each other. We don't do as much. So I would encourage as Black people, when we come to these places, don't come here and stick to yourself. Even if we don't stay in the same neighborhood per se, let's do things together. Let's come together. And if I'm in the street or in the store and you see me, don't put your head down and act like you didn't see me. Come on.
It's amazing. It is amazing to leave the state and still come to a different country.
Yes.
Still have the same. It's terrible. It is.
And that's why I was asking, do you really think we could pull that off as far as having a community in another country?
I do. We mentioned earlier about Merida. Merida actually has that. I mean, they actually do that. I mean,
I think these are people with different mindsets as well, too.
Well, I mean, I think together. So, I mean, if there's a particular area, a lot of times though, we come down and we want to go to the beachy resort areas. I mean, everybody wants to go on vacation type living. Well, when you go to beachy resort areas, that area has already been bought up by other expats. So when you get down there, you're already the minority again. And so it's a little different. Like I said about Merida and Tulum and all those places, we already are in abundance. So when you go down there, you're already welcomed by you. And so it has a different feeling already. And so even though we haven't gone, that is definitely a spot that, again, if Black people want to come down and make their first visit, Merida, I would definitely suggest. Merida, Tulum area, definitely. And remember, again, there are some places like Merida, the only downside, and my wife has made it known, the only downside is the weather. Again, most of Mexico is very perfect all year round.
It's just the outside.
Merida makes Miami, Florida look like, the Arctic.
Oh, Lord.
People have made this comment. I'm going to use their comment. People have said living in Merida, especially during the summertime, is like walking on the sun. I mean, it's hot and humid. Again, Miami, Florida has nothing. And that's the only drawback.
And that's why we wouldn't do it, because we've lived in the hot and humid and the hot and dry, and for us, no. But we've been doing some research about other areas where there are Blacks, and and so that's what we're looking into, to try to get acclimated in those areas as well. So it's not just there. You just have to really do your research, put yourself out there, and ask a lot of questions. But there are enough of us in different areas, because all of us don't like the beach. All of us don't like the heat, so, whatever you're looking for, if you want hot, you'll find it. You want cold, you'll find it too. You want whatever you're looking for. All the climates are in Mexico. So whatever you want, you'll find it there. Just doing the research to find the people.
And so for your little ones, how have they gotten along as far as making friends with Mexican children, the language barrier? Have they gotten pretty fluent in Spanish, or did you guys mostly stick with expat communities?
No, we don't stick with expat.
It's challenging for them, especially the little girl. She'll tell us, "I'm not going to learn Spanish." I said, "Well, if you don't learn Spanish, you're not going to have very many friends." And
sounds like my son.
And so it's a little challenging for them. They'll go outside and play with the friends. And, what my husband said to them in Spanish was just show them, use your hands to tell them what you want. And using your hands, do the best that you can. And they'll understand what you're saying. And so we'll teach them little phrases. Well, my husband, I'm still in a process of learning. But nonetheless, you use the little knowledge that we have in the language. We would tell them, say this, or this is what they're saying, or this is what they mean. But sometimes I think it gets frustrating, because they'll just start talking, and then the friend will look at them, and it's like, oh.
Or the friend will start talking.
Friend will start talking, and our kids are like, but I don't know what you're saying. So I think in that aspect, it gets a little frustrating. But if they don't talk, they'll have a great time. Great time. Yeah.
And you'll see from both sets, the Spanish friends and our English-speaking kids. Like you'll see the Spanish kids who come past, hello, and they'll stress the little English that they've learned. And then our kids, like somebody falls, and I remember they were riding their bikes, and I remember, the little boy he was on the ground, and our son went up to him and, está bien, está bien. And, the little boy was like, yeah. And so, when each group knows a certain phrase or terminology that the other one may know, they're quick to try to use it for whatever the reason is. But, they were able to do that like that. And that worked. But yeah, they definitely need to learn and become acclimated with the language. Otherwise, it's going to be a lonely road. However, I will say that the advantage that these little ones have over other expat kids is because they're twins. They always have each other, so they never don't have a playmate. Right. So even when they're outside and their friends don't want to play with them, because they may not understand anything, no problem, we got each other, and so they'll go off with each other and play. And so they want to acclimate themselves with others, but if they can't, whatever, we got ourselves, and that's good to an extent. We really want them to, really get involved with the others.
What about activities for the children there, like parks or sports activities? Were you guys interested in those? Are they available?
As far as the parks, there's so many, because it's family friendly here. There are parks everywhere. Parks, and there's, and not just little parks, big parks, and they have a lot of playground stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff that you don't even see in the States anymore. Seesaws, like the type of seesaws that we see here. The other day we saw a merry-go-round. I was like, wow, I haven't seen one of those in years. So, just the things that you take for granted that we used to have growing up, they have that kind of stuff here. So when we went back to the States, the kids were, well, where's the merry-go-round? I'm like, oh, well, we don't have that kind of stuff here. Well, where's the seesaw? Well, we don't have that here either. So when they came back here, it's like, oh, seesaws or merry-go-round. So it's a lot of nice parts, lots of parts as far as sports.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest things, and I think here, and this is not about, the whole COVID thing, but I am going to make this comment because of what I'm getting ready to say. Because of COVID, everything shut down. Mm-hmm. I mean, so that's life as it was is just, it completely changed for everybody on earth. The one difference in Mexico is that it almost didn't change. The little kids that went outside and played, I mean, soccer is obviously, that's like a worldwide big thing everywhere, but the US. So, going outside and kicking a ball around or playing with the other little kids, it wasn't so much with organized sports. It's more so just kids getting a chance to play together. Mm-hmm. And I think during this time period that everybody's been separated from one another, one of the blessings about being here is that the kids here have not been separated from one another. They really have had the opportunity to still play together. And I think that's one of the things for our kids, at least, that they don't understand. I was talking to like I said, those guys from the UK and Spain and Morocco and stuff. And, they were talking about how it's just been so separated and they've got to stay separate, all this other stuff. I don't know how to feel about that or even with, my kids with playing and stuff, because they've never not had the ability to play with other kids. So they have no clue what it means. So as far as organized sports, not necessarily. With the bigger kids, when our son was with us, the first time, he played, they had citywide basketball. And so he played citywide basketball. I mean, he's 6 feet tall, which was taller than many of the people that were on his team. And then being black, you know what they think about. Oh yeah, so he's a black kid at 6 feet tall. Yeah, he can play ball. Oh yeah. And he could dunk. So that sort of just like put it way over.
Overnight superstar.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as organized sports, if he wanted to get involved, they had soccer there at the gym, in the field. They had a baseball team, so he could have done anything had he wanted to. He just chose basketball, obviously, because that was his level of familiarity, and he did well with it. So as far as the opportunity for organized sports, there is basketball, there is baseball, and obviously again there's soccer, which you're never going to get away from that. Once you leave the States, everybody is big on soccer.
Yes.
So as far as preparing to move in your finances, were you all already working independently, remotely, online, or whatever? How do you guys support yourselves in Mexico?
So I even though as far as a degree, well, let me say this. I want to say this. And again, I mentioned I love to give a shout out to my wife as often as possible. When we got married, we both worked in our respective fields. And my wife said to me, well, she was my girlfriend at the time. And she said to me, listen, I'm letting you know, as far as the number of children, she didn't give me a number. She said, but when I start having babies, I want to stay home. I said, okay, whatever. That's noble. And so anyway, so I'm at work one day and my wife, she lets me know that, she's pregnant, and my wife quit, and she's pregnant with our oldest son. I mean, she just quit. I mean, she's in physical therapy and she's doing, this is what but she quit. I mean, I'm stressing that. And I said, well, what's happening? So we talked about it. And my wife, like I said, our son is 18. So for almost the last 19 years, my wife was like, listen, my full-time job is to create these new young minds. And so for the last almost 19 years, my wife has worked as a full-time teacher / doctor / counselor / everything in between, being a mom. And so we've had to, as I mentioned before, about being creative. And so I've had to, again, be creative. So not only with the medical piece as far as being a site, but also we've created businesses throughout. And we've had a couple of businesses. Obviously, with any business, it starts and flops and things. So we've gone through a number of those. But so we've had one that we started back in 05, 6, somewhere between 05 and 7. And that's been it's been our major contributor. We've been very successful. I do with finance and global currencies and things. When we moved to Mexico, because sometimes you may have heard us say about the first time, we moved to Mexico, and then we moved back to the States because our son wanted to graduate from high school, which, it is what it is. Anyway, as soon as he graduated, a couple months later, we came back.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like, okay, we're done. Let's go back. And so, but the first time when we moved, the wheels were turning already. And it was like, hey, what can we do? What do we need to do? And we moved originally to a resort town. And there were a lot of people who were flying into airports and things, and they wanted to get to a resort. And so, we were able to use some of the connections that we had, and we created a transportation line that would get people from the airport. So it was a luxury transportation line, get people from the airports to the resorts, and it was very successful. I mean, God blessed us so much so that we stopped doing advertisements. We could not do marketing because we were getting we had to turn people away.
The demand was too high.
Yeah, so we stopped marketing.
You hired drivers? Did you purchase cars, vehicles, or you rented them?
We were doing leasing, yeah. Leasing was much more. I talked to a couple of consultants, and leasing made it much better for the tax purposes.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, and even now, we've been out of that business for a little while,
and we're still getting
it. It's like,
you're no longer there.
I'm no longer there. So, but yeah, so that's it's like God bless us with that one, and so anytime we move, it's like, okay, so what are we going to do? And that's what we've always thought. So now we're here. Let's stay here for a little bit. We got some money coming in. But we look around and say, what is the demand here? What do the people need here? And so we're working on that even now, trying to figure out what it is that we want to do here as well.
Okay. Because I know some people go with the mindset of, I need to make sure I have something steady before I move so that I can, because a lot of people, when they move, they still want to maintain the same level of comfort that they are coming from. And so sometimes that mindset needs to change a little bit as well. But that's a different approach by going and saying, what is the demand or what is the need here? And then insinuating yourself into that arena. That's a wonderful way to not only provide for yourself, but again, assimilate yourself more into the culture by being something that they actually need and can use, and not just, taking up space.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I think as Americans, specifically, and I mentioned that. And again, I love, I was asked, are you guys going to ever renounce your citizenship? No, I'm a born American. I'm not leaving. I'm an American. But I think the one thing about Americans that I think we really have to realize is that we do have privilege. And not to take that for granted. We do have privileges. And one of the privileges is that we do have the ability to actually earn a little bit more than many of the places that we go. Yes. And so, with privilege comes responsibility. And so if you're going to go to an area that has less of a privilege, then we have a responsibility to create opportunities for the people that, where we're borrowing their land. Mm-hmm. And so if we're going to be there, we've got to make life easier for them. So even like when we did the transportation, most of our drivers were Mexican. And the thought was, listen, if I'm here and you're letting me stay in your land and you're allowing me to do business, then the least I can do is, give you all the jobs.
And the thing that we loved about hiring the Mexican drivers, so the wages here are extremely low. A few years ago, it was raised to $9 a day.
So minimum wage
is a day. So I thought was, okay, no, this is just coming from America. This is really unacceptable. Although for them, it was like, $9 a day. We're like, okay, no, we're going to do a whole lot more. So when we offered the positions to some of the drivers, just the mere fact that they were making they're
making U.S. money.
And so for them, the opportunity was great. And so we helped them to help their family. So we felt like we were really giving back.
Now, let me ask you, how easy is it to start a business in Mexico as foreigners? Are there laws in place that facilitate the process, or is it difficult?
So when we started the first business, we were able to, because a lot of people were going back and forth between the states. We were about 4 hours from the states. And so people would fly into the U.S. and then come across the border, which is where we came in. And so they would fly into the U.S. and then come across the border in our transportation. So we were able to create it in such a way that we only had to worry about the U.S. laws. On the Mexican side, we had to abide by Mexican law, but we were able to incorporate in the U.S. as long as our trips, as long as everything had to do with the U.S., we were able to cross the border. So we didn't have to deal with the Mexican laws as much. Learning the Mexican laws and having a number of friends who have businesses and things, it's not that difficult at all. One of the biggest things I can say that we're looking at even right now in Mexican business is that they want to make sure that you're hiring, and I think I saw it most recently, that the majority of your employees are Mexican. Yeah, that makes sense. And the biggest thing is just understanding that their taxes. That I think is, again, coming from America, I understand the American tax laws, but tax laws here are totally different. And so that's probably the greatest portion of challenge I think that we face. But other than that, like I said, the biggest thing is simply once you get into business, it may take a couple of days in the US where things may take a little longer here. And again, it's easy though. It's not like it's difficult. It's just longer because there's Mexican time, if I could use that terminology. So it's not more difficult. It's not more stringent. The biggest rule in everything is that you have to hire the majority of Mexican employees. And I think the one thing I think that's different than the U.S., and that's a big one, is that for Mexican employees, if you keep an employee longer than a year, and I found that out most recently, you have to provide for them. It's a different terminology, but I'm gonna use it from what we understand from America's standpoint. You've got to provide for them like a retirement package type thing. So even if you have like a nanny or even a guy that cuts your grass, if you have a gardener or whatever the case is, if they are your consistent employee for over a year and you specifically employ them over a year, you have to provide for them. So if you just say, well, listen, I don't want you to work for me any longer, you've got to provide for them some sort of package, in order to let them go. You can't just say no more and they just have to say, okay, we're gone. No. Yeah, you have to give them some sort of package to let them go. It may be, listen, I'll pay you, up front, 3 months of what you were previously working for. And you do that, but you have to do that. Otherwise, they can take you to court and you really can get sued, and you don't want that to happen. So that's the only real difference between there and this.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting, but it's
kind of like
guarding.
Yeah, it's kind of like unemployment benefits, except it's directly from the employee, it's not through the government.
Right. Yeah.
So it's fair. I think it's fair.
Absolutely, for sure.
And on that note, you were saying that you guys were crossing the border. I know a lot of times Mexico gets labeled as unsafe. Can you guys, I know, but can you guys speak to the safety of Mexico for just a minute?
So I will say this, and I'm saying this specifically to anyone, especially those from America that would be listening. And we laughed about it every single time. Every time there's a major holiday that Americans are preparing to travel to Mexico, somehow out of the blue, Code Red comes up. Mexico is unsafe. There are multiple killings, and that's every time we always laugh because we always knew it was going to happen. And every single time without fail, Mexico always became dangerous when it was time for vacations. And I will say, like our daughter, she's 17. And speaking of the as far as being dangerous, we didn't live in or don't live in an area that you would say is like some upper class ritzy. I mean, we lived in a regular Mexican neighborhood. It was a big deal.
And of course, we didn't live in the hood either.
Yeah, we didn't live in the hood. I mean, but again, I mean, if you're talking about the slums of Chicago, something like that. I mean, come on, I wouldn't do it there. But still, we lived in an average area. It was everyone around us was a Mexican. It wasn't upper class. It was just a regular spot. My daughter said that she forgot she lost or broke or something her battery charger, her phone charger or something like that. She had to go to the store. It was nighttime. Again, I have a 17-year-old daughter who needs to make a run to the store at night. So she walks. Did my wife and I, did we feel as though she was going to get trafficked or kidnapped or shot or anything else? Not at all. I mean, it was so, the level of comfortability. When we lived in Arizona,
I was more afraid there.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, wow. But here, I mean, for the most part, especially when people know that you're an expat or that you're an American, and being Black is a good thing. I want to say this. This is the first time that our skin color has actually worked in our advantage.
I would say the same thing in Tijuana. That was me being Black was like oh, I'm in there basically, and and just how they talk to me versus how they talk to, the younger white children that was there was completely different.
Yes.
And they kind of made fun of them, and like, it was like, this is my family here, and we talking about an outsider. I was never considered like an outsider. It definitely was that feeling there. It just, I appreciated it. I was like, that's what's up.
Yes. Oh, most definitely. And they remember you because you're Black. It's not that difficult. It's like, like we went to one store, the same place that my daughter was going to. We went there once before. My wife had always gone, but then my daughter went one day. And the guy said, the owner of the store, he said, the little shop, he said, oh, you want what your mother normally gets. Now, they had never gone together. So how did you know that this girl was this woman's daughter, except we're the only ones that look like us? So it was super easy. I mean, it and stuff like that. And, and it's not a negative thing. It's just that they remember you much easier. And so it's easier to remember some of your likes and some of your dislikes. And it's much easier. And so, I mean, it's great. It's great. So no, as far as the safety, no, we've driven through certain areas. The only thing that I will say, as far as traveling at night, is not, and it's not so much about getting hijacked or, drug cartel or anything of that nature. Traveling at night is dangerous. And it's dangerous because a cow could cross in front of you and there are no lights on the roads. They put speed bumps on the highways.
Right.
I mean, people are crossing the street. Yeah, listen.
The potholes are ridiculous.
Mexico is horrible with potholes. You drive 60 miles an hour, you're going to lose both of your tires if you hit one of those. So that would be the main reason why I would say about driving at night. We've never had a concern about a safety issue. It's always what's about to happen to us.
Even when we drove, so we're in Guadalajara. So even though when we drove all the way from Arizona to Guadalajara, it was some of the same things, the speed bumps, just all the normal things. Well, what he just mentioned. But as far as being afraid, didn't feel any fear. I mean, we saw people standing in the middle of the highway trying to collect money, stopping us. And even with that, it's just give them a few pesos and keep it moving, So we had no issues at all at night.
But you may hit a cow, so you may want to go slow.
Except
Tijuana had the worst roads. And it was like driving at night, and they drove so close to the cliff. I'm like, man, there's nothing on the side of it. So if we go over, that's just it. And he's driving like 90 miles an hour. I was like, yikes. But that's their everyday thing. So, I mean, if he's comfortable, I got to be comfortable. He do this every day.
And that's basically, even with driving down in the big cities, Mexico City or Guadalajara or some of the big cities, you feel like, like you're on the Autobahn sometimes. It's like, what are these people doing? They're speeding, cutting in and out of traffic. But there's a method to the madness, and everybody knows what they're doing. Even though it's madness, it's perfect order out of chaos.
Same here.
I was just about to say, it's the same here, because sometimes you just be like, I don't even, and then, we've been here so long, so we've been able to adapt with the driving. But I remember when my aunt came, she was terrified. Bless my aunt was just holding on to the seat, the white her knuckles. She was just like, how do you do this? And we was like, what can we,
But as chaotic as it is, you see much less accidents.
Absolutely. And you wonder, how is it possible that you don't see more accidents? But everybody just, I don't know.
Go with the flow. I want to ask you guys a question. You mentioned that sometimes there are people in the street begging for money. Here in Egypt, it's very much a beggar culture. And especially, unfortunately, during Ramadan, now it's Ramadan. And I mean, I get it. People are more generous during Ramadan. So there are even more beggars in the streets. Like, I went to the store today to get a few things, and like 4 different people approached me. And, I gave them money, but then they asked for more. It's like, okay, I gave you what I wanted to give you. Is there a big beggar culture there? I'm just curious.
Yes, it is. what we used to, so the first time we went to that certain part of Mexico where we were in the first time, we saw it a lot. And I think because they knew we were in a touristy town. So, I mean, you always hit up the tourists. You put on the sad face, and if that doesn't work, send the kids out. No one will ever say no to the kids. So, yeah, the adults weren't coming, but they would send their kids.
Yeah,
and we
asked that because I've also been to like Mazatlan and Cabo. And Cabo, of course, was definitely different. I mean, on the beach, you can't get away from the beg and the
right.
So I could see the difference, but I didn't see any sort of really begging in like Tijuana. But I guess that's because we were in the neighborhood. We weren't in. It's not necessarily a tourist place where people who have money come. But Cabo's like that's rich. And everybody.
Yeah. That's all money.
So in that aspect of the begging, it's generally what we've seen is where they know most Americans are. So outside of that, you may see a couple of homeless people on the streets. Like one area we were in, we saw a few homeless guys on the street, and some of the Mexican men gave them money. So it wasn't just because we weren't in a touristy. We're not in a tourist area where we're in. It's not a touristy area, and so. In that regards, no, not as much. But when you do go to the beaches and to the different cities, you'll see it big time. And like I said, we've learned, no, we're not going to just give you money. If you want to do something, if you want to wash my windows, sure. If you want to wash my car, hey, go ahead. I'll give you some money, but I'm not just going to give you money, and especially if we're in a certain place for a certain amount of time, whether it's a few weeks, months, depending on where we are at the time, it varies. So it just all depends.
Can I add into that? One of the things, and stressing this, Mexican men, and I heard it, Mexican men are workers. I mean, it's just by their nature. They work. And one of the things one of the most embarrassing things for a man in general, but even more so for a Mexican man, is to take away his ability to work. He wants to work. That's what he's been taught. That's who he is. And so if you have a Mexican man begging, that's already demeaning by itself. And so instead of letting him, and if he's begging, it's probably because he really needs it. But instead of doing that, what my wife was saying, listen, how about you just do this job for me? We had a couple of people a couple of friends who said what they did was one guy asked him for money. He said, listen, come past my house tomorrow and you can rake all my leaves and I'll pay you. If you come past the next day, you can do this and I'll pay you. And so they began to develop this pride in that I'm doing a job. And I think that's one of they'll wash your windows at the stoplights. One thing that I really love, they'll do like circus acts in the middle of the road. I mean, they'll get on a unicycle and juggle fire. It's like, yo, I'll pay you for this. This is beautiful. I love it. But encouraging them to actually do work for money as opposed to giving you. Because, if it's seen like that, like I said, first, it's demeaning to you. But secondly, if the kids see that I can get money without doing anything, then the kids will grow up believing that I don't have to do anything and I can still get paid. So it helps to change the generational thinking. So that's an aspect that we really try to do as well.
I want to go ahead and ask you guys about the visa situation in Mexico. How easy is it to renew visas there? I know you guys are not planning on staying in Mexico, but what about if you want to gain residency there? What's the process like?
I was talking to a buddy the other day, and we realized that on Earth, Mexico is probably the best country. And the buddy I'm talking to, he was in the UK, and he was referring to another one of his friends in Spain, and a couple of guys in Morocco. And we were just talking about different places on Earth, Turkey and other places. Mexico, hands down at this point, after listening to these guys talk, Mexico is the best country on Earth. For the visa, for the visa process, you come here. If you're coming as an American, you don't need a visa, which a number of countries do that. You can stay up to 6 months, which some countries do that. Then there are some countries that after the 6 months, you have to leave. In Mexico, you can just renew it online.
Wow. Yeah.
So you don't have to go to a government office. You don't have to deal with Grumpy Maria.
That's what I'm saying. It's so, and then if you're there for a year, so you can do that for the first year. So after you do it for the first year, if you're just staying on a level of tourist, and it's called the FMM. I mean, it's a Spanish term, but after the first year, after you do it for one full year, What they do ask at this point is that you have it, signed or whatever the case is, either from, go to the consulate, or if you just leave and come, so you can make like a quick border run. You can put 1 foot out into the States and come right back, and your whole time starts all over.
Okay, right.
So I mean, it's super simple. So like I said, so you
that's a tourist visa, right?
Well, like I said, we don't need a tourist visa, but it's an FMM, so it's immigration's form is what they call it. It's not really a tourist visa, but yeah, it's for that purpose.
Okay. Now, is there like a limited number of times you can renew this?
Until you die.
All right.
You can do that. You can. That's for life, and it's not something like keep it under the table because the Mexican government. No, it's legitimate. I mean, it's for real.
That's important.
Wow, that is important.
And then you mentioned as far as the residency, the residency here is super simple. If you can, they want to make sure that that you're a legitimate person. So you got to have the real ID and stuff, your passport, all that. But all they ask is that you make at least $1,500. The equivalent is you have at least $1,500 of outside of Mexico money coming into your bank account on a monthly basis. If you show that you can support yourself by making at least $1,500 outside, US dollars, outside money, you can easily get approved for a residency, which either 1, 5, or 10-year residency. That's it.
And that's probably, that goes to show why that's an ideal spot for retirees. Out of Mexico and all that, just because of that low cost of living, and then that low cost of money that you have to have coming in to sustain yourself.
Right. The minimum legal barriers, requirements.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. That's why a lot of people come.
And so is that $1,500 per adult or per household?
Per household. If I in my household, if I make $1,500, if I come in and like I said, because my wife works at home, if I come in and I show I can do this, my wife gets residency because I've applied, and so and my children get residency because I've applied. So it's all the way through $1,500.
That's very manageable. So then $1,500 for the house. So what then is the cost of living like? What is the rent like?
I love it.
My wife has been keeping account every month for what we spend on groceries.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
And so, we look at all these videos about other people putting everything else. And we've been talking about maybe doing a video like this because we've been trying to do it very accurately. So this is for a family of 5. We spend on groceries. What do we spend, sweetie, on a monthly average for groceries?
Well, it depends. So when we first moved, of course, it was higher because we didn't know anything. We were just buying all what we knew.
Right.
But once that settled, you're talking about eating out.
All food, eating out,
groceries, and then I would buy my fruits and vegetables from the little fruterias on the street.
Right.
So a total about maybe $300, $350.
And again, that's not groceries only. That's groceries, eating out, snacks. That's all any food that is consumed by somebody in this house. Right. $350 for a family of 5.
And that was on a high month, but normally I can do about $250-ish.
Wow.
To feed all of us. And I'm not talking about, we're not starving.
Yeah, so this is not fat. This is not eating.
Right.
Of course. Right. What do you think, Brittany? I think we're kind of.
So $350, that's 5,600 pounds. My budget is 6,000 pounds. So that's less than my budget. So that's cheaper than
I think your brother's a little bit fancy. So sometimes, a little bit, but still it's very reasonable. Okay. That's good. Yep.
Awesome.
That's awesome. That was great for us because we were coming from $500-$600 a month. And then coming down to $250, $300, we're like, whoo. So yeah, that was
only that's not just for groceries.
Yeah, and that was just groceries, But then
not counting the eating out, and because I'm sure.
Right. Oh yes, true. Yeah.
And housing. I mean, housing is. We were looking at a video because we're looking at different parts of Mexico and things. Just looking at different things. One lady that we were looking at. She has a 3-bedroom house? 3-bedroom house. And she pays the equivalent of a US $175 a month.
Whoa.
But it all depends too on what part of Mexico you're in, because
touristy areas always
areas are always going to be more.
Of course.
And that's what we've seen. The first time we moved to Mexico, we got a house, and I think we were paying like $600 a month, and it was a 3-bed, 2-bath. They had a huge yard. We were sitting on top of the hill, gated on the beach. So for us, that was really dirt cheap. And of course, our Mexican friends, they were like, "Oh, that's super expensive." I said, "No, if you knew where we were coming from, this is dirt cheap." We were paying $2,300 a month. So coming from $2,300 a month to $600, yeah. So, but it all depends on what part of Mexico, because the prices can get as high as the U.S., higher. And
if you're in a resort or something like that, yeah.
So it's, I say on average, it's probably, I would say maybe a third on average, a third of what the U.S. would cost, maybe more in many.
And when you got your house, did you take it furnished or was it unfurnished?
We only do
we only do furnished
because we sold everything, and that's just because our thought is, if we decide, hey, I don't want to be here anymore, all we have is just a few boxes that we have, and we can take it and ship it anywhere. So that's why we did that, because our desire is, what if we get tired of where we are? What if we want to experience something else? We want to be able to move and not worry about furniture and all that stuff. So no.
Oh, okay. Yes, I can see that.
And that's really good.
Yeah,
for a furnished apartment.
Yeah, exactly. That's really good. What would you say is the craftsmanship like of the houses or the property that you live in?
Well, first of all, everything is cement. So, the flood from Noah couldn't knock down a house here.
Right.
This stuff is for real.
But let me just say this about the cement. We saw a house fire. And, when there's a house fire, in the States, that whole thing can get burned down easily. This particular house fire, it was just any part inside of the house that had wood, that's all that burned. And her house, that lady's house, completely burned. But her whole shell of her house was up. Her windows, all this stuff was still up. It was just anything that had a little piece of wood. Yeah. It burned. Yeah, but outside of that, that house stood. So
so as far as that's concerned, the cement, that's beautiful. And it takes them forever to make a house.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna, if you start your house, now, expect 2022 to come around and you're still maybe waiting for your house.
Well, it depends on what size.
Your size. As far as you said craftsmanship, I chuckled to myself. Many of the standards as Americans that we know, you won't necessarily see a lot of those. Just little things, and things as small as like the piping that's used for the toilets. They use smaller pipes, which means that most people, you have to buy a certain type of toilet tissue because you can't flush the regular thick toilet tissue down the toilet. So, stuff like that.
So same here. They put the toilet paper in the trash can instead of flushing it down the toilet.
Okay. Or if you buy that super duper slim half ply. But that's wood chips right there. So, so stuff like that. It's just little things like that.
Now here with the cement buildings, it's very poor insulation. And so in the summertime, it's really hot. And in the wintertime, it's really cold. Is it the same there?
Yes, it is. But that too also depends where you are, where you live. For instance, the second time around when we came back, we moved to a condo, and so we moved in October-ish, and it was nice in the daytime. In the evening, it got really cool, but not cold enough. But when December came around, those bricks, there's no insulation. And I was like, and of course, this side of the world, there's a lot, because the temperature doesn't get as hot. A lot of homes don't have air conditioning.
Most people don't have
Most people don't do air conditioners here.
Not like you guys.
Yeah, so it doesn't get hot. Yeah, so we just did everything with the ceiling fan. But then when the wind, like I said, the cooler months came, oh man, I had space heaters. And my husband was like, this is ridiculous. No, I don't. I like cool. I like cold, but not when I'm going to sleep and not when I'm waking right up. And so, times we would use the space heater. But once the sun came up, the house was pretty much an even temperature. And it was very, very nice. And when it started getting warm, put on the ceiling fan. and it kept the house cool. We just lowered the blinds. We kept it, closed a little bit, just to see the sun, and that was it. And so we had no issues there.
And also, just to note, Mexico has three major pieces of land. There's the mountain. Obviously, there's it has the Atlantic on one side and the Pacific on the other side, and then there's desert. Well, but most of Mexico is mountainous. It has the mountains come all the way through, and so most of the cities in Mexico are in the mountain. We have high altitude. So for the most part, most of Mexico, Fahrenheit is between maybe like 40 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit for most of Mexico. I'm saying Fahrenheit, yeah.
Fahrenheit 40?
Yeah, between 40 and 90.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Between 40 at night and 80 in the daytime. Yeah. So that's most of the country. And the beauty in all of that is because we're mostly higher altitude, the wind is always going to be blowing. So and people joke around about the Mexican wind. That's no joke. At 6 o'clock every night, it's going to get really windy. I mean, it happens every day at 6 o'clock. And so no matter what the temperature was in the daytime, at about 6 o'clock, the weather's going to change.
In the mountains, could you imagine? I miss trees immensely. Living over here, it definitely is more, how you say, concrete jungle. I miss trees. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington, so I miss trees and, the grass everywhere and the mountains and the view. And so that was definitely one change that I had to work through was, having that a lot of nature around, essentially everywhere.
I think that was for us one of our biggest, well, for me, my husband didn't care. I was like, look, honey, we lived in Arizona for so many years. And all we saw was a lot of desert. Not necessarily Phoenix, but more in Tucson. And I was like, no, I want to see trees. I want grass. I want to run my feet through the grass. I'm tired of dirt. I'm just tired. So wherever we go, no more desert. I don't want.
Can I get an amen?
Yeah.
I mean, hey, some people are made for the deserts, but I'm not one of them.
I don't mind the desert.
All right, well, that wraps it up. We are out of time. And I totally want to really let you guys know that we really appreciate you guys coming on in the midst of your busy moments in life.
Thank you for listening to Tribe Travelers. If you like what you heard, join the Facebook group and interact with other families of color living abroad. You can find links to our guest platforms as well as our platforms in the show notes. If you'd like to be a part of the show, email us at tribetravelerspodcast@gmail.com.